Good time zone. A happy birthday to all of those around the world. If you're watching this live, then you know we're super late. But, yeah, I set up, setting up everything I needed to set up for this type of stream, and for some reason, it just wasn't quite right. I'm not, I don't know, the camera was like off, and I could not, for the life of me, figure out why it just wasn't the same as it was in previous, oh, I say previous streams, the last one that was probably the better one in terms of capturing everything. I could not get it. I could not get the angles and everything the same way. But I think after trying for far too long, the show must go on though. I think I got it in a good enough, in a pretty much the same as last time. We'll see. We'll see. But I did not want to give up. I wanted to get some reading done for this eventually, but now we're here. So, Terra, a Journey. Last time we had finished off chapter 4. We had started chapter 5, which was on the countries. The countries of the world. We started with Victoria. We saw some more bias between Erikson and his interpretation of and his presentation of history. And now we are starting Litania. Bam. Litania. We've got the twin spires of the twin empresses. See, I think it's too close, but I also, if I can't get it, I just can't get the right angle. I don't know how I did it last time. Last time was I feel like the perfect amount of, it's not too far, and it's not too close. It's just right, but this one, I don't know, whatever. Here we are. Litania, the land of divine music, cradle of the arts. So many have envied your genius, so many have mourned your fate. Following the conclusion of my studies 60 years ago, I left Litania to escape the fires of war. I have returned several times since, but never stayed for long. As a matter of fact, all that I have seen in Litania made it abundantly clear that the place is very different from the land of learning I remembered. But I still remember the question I held in my heart as I stood on the deck of the warship sailing away from Litania, gazing upon the dark clouds that filled the sky and the broken desolation beneath. Why has man become so when he should not have been? The familiar strangeness of Litania is one of the reasons why I decided to embark upon this work. I realized I got to put the music on this section. There we go. Overview. The Litanian Empire, land of casters and spires, is one of Terra's oldest great powers. It was Orangenium arts that built the empire, but it is the history and culture of Litania that has had a lasting impact in the core and beyond. Discord and war have played major roles in Litania's recent history for hundreds of years, sometimes even dragging her neighbors into the maelstrom. Yet now, the overthrow of the Witch King's reign of terror and the ascension of the Twin Empresses has brought light of hope back again to the Empire. But there is always an undertone of unease beneath the surface. Could the main theme of the Empire's music really be rearranged so easily? It's got official language, Litanian. Dominant groups, Caprine. Official currency, the ducat, as depicted here. Ducat minted by Franz Frederick Kurfürst of Wasserland. The ducat is the signature coinage of Litania. Each Kurfürst mints his own ducats, which are recognized across the 9 Kreis. The Gulden Gestats enforces the law, while the gold coin boosts the economy. Interesting that each, duke is allowed to mint their own coin. Usually the monarch is the sole person to do that. History. Prelude to the Empire. The Empire of Litania was not always a unified polity. 9 of the 10 Kreis regions that comprise the Empire, stretching from central Terra to Kazdal in the east, had each formed their own tribal governments, with the exception of Siracusa, which was geographically closest to Kazdal, remaining in a state of chaos due to varied reasons. One of these tribes, the principal population of which was Caprine, excelled in Orangenium arts and began to fuse their arts with the medium they believed to be the most powerful, sound. The study of sound as a medium for arts led to the rapid development of music, as well as associated artistic and cultural activities. The other tribes began learning art and culture from the Caprine, and the Caprine in turn integrated the culture of these tribes into their own in the name of harmony. Over time, a common cultural identity began to develop, with the exception of Siracusa, which remained culturally distinct from the 9 Kreis. Ultimately, it was the threat of Kazdal that drove the unification of Litania. Kazdal was at the height of her power, her shadow looming larger over all 10 Kreis. Recognizing that they could not oppose the strength of Kazdal individually, the 9 Kreis joined forces with Siracusa, which felt the threat posed by Kazdal more than any other. The leaders of the 9 tribes and the dons of Siracusa reached a consensus that came to be known as the Gulden Gestats, establishing the framework of a unified state around the territory of the 9 Kreis, with Siracusa becoming an autonomous hold of the newly founded Empire of Litania. We're already learning about Siracusa in this, which I think is really interesting. So we knew that Siracusa was at one point part of Litania, and they but I always pictured if they were part of Litania, at that point in time they were governed like Litania. But no, from the get-go, they were never actually governed at all like Litania. They were always an autonomous territory. So from the very beginning, they've had dons, right? Nobilitas presto. For many years, Litania enjoyed the stability of freedom from outside threats, allowing her to grow into a powerful empire with remarkably increasing productivity at the center of Terra. Contemporaneously, the Litanians continued to promote a cultural environment that valued Orangenium arts and general arts. A system of nobility that was established alongside imperial politics played a big part in this. who, wait, what was it? What was the sentence? The nobility, who wielded powerful arts and promoted culture, built academic institutes in their fiefs, sharing the knowledge they possessed and funding research in more obscure fields. These institutes of learning were known as spires, and gradually became the symbol of noble power in Litania. Thus, the nobility was called nobles of the spires. I do like the visual of all these spires around. Practically mage towers, really. But also seats of nobility. Dissonanzen. For all of their mastery over Orangenium arts, the Litanians were not without threats, both internal and external. There were conflicts with neighbors, some of which were initiated by Litania herself. For example, the invasion of war-torn Bolivar in 897 TC. TC, I think that's the first time I've ever seen that. TC. What is TC? Resulted in the installation of a Litanian puppet government intended to gain full control of the area. Internally, separatism was a constant problem. In 967, a substantial independence movement arose in Siracusa, which had always held a distinct identity from the other 9 Kreis. The fires of rebellion soon spread to the rest of Litania. The Kurfürsten, prince-electors, demanded resources and political authority, ostensibly in order to quell the rebellion, but in fact to consolidate their own strength, pushing the ancient empire to the brink. It was at this time that the legendary ruler took the throne, his reign bringing a protracted variation to the music of Litania. It's always so interesting that Litania invaded Bolivar. That the entire civil war going on in Bolivar right now is because it's also a proxy war fielded between Litania and Colombia over the country. Litania is not very close to Bolivar. But they decided to go for it. This picture is modern nomadic cities are typically filled with skyscrapers. From Victoria to Columbia to Yen, the only thing that rises in the sky in Litania, however, are the spires of nobility. Each spire is unique, its height symbolizing the status of its master. We also have, before we start the Witch King variation, we have this symbol here. The symbol believed to be associated with the Witch King. Its meaning is unknown. Most objects branded with the symbol have been confiscated or destroyed. One reason why Witch King cultists speculate that it contains part of the Witch King's power. Perhaps it did not occur to them that it was not just one imagery that was destroyed, but many relics of the old regime. So yeah, Witch King variation. A powerful caster by the name of Herkenfjorn ruled over Litania from 969 to 1077. Known as the Witch King, Herkenfjorn is considered by some to be the most powerful user of Orangenium arts in all of history. He definitely was. No doubt about it, he definitely was. And here he is. Ascending to the throne during a period of internal strife and external threat, the Witch King immediately enacted a series of decisive policies that demonstrated incredible intelligence and vision. He quickly solved the empire's internal issues by recognizing the independence of Syracusans, whose distinct identity had long been a point of contention, and centralizing imperial administration by weakening the authority and military power of the Kurfürsten. The Litanians saw Herkufshorn as a savior, with no inkling of the terror that was to come. Herkufshorn continued to centralize power, and for the first time in history, the Kaiser, Emperor, enjoyed greater authority than the Herkufshorn. He ushered in sweeping reforms that homogenized culture across Litania, and brought about a rapid development of economy and education. Litania prospered under his leadership, but dissent emerged amongst the nobility. Herkufshorn dealt with the different voices harshly, leading to a vicious cycle of increasing resistance and crackdown. As the conflict escalated, Herkufshorn's methods grew increasingly brutal, employing part of the royal forces as secret police and spies. Dissidents were arrested and even slaughtered en masse, resulting in the bloodiest period in Litania history. Meanwhile, Herkufshorn had grown aloof, shutting himself away in his spire, rarely showing his face in public. The people of Litania had to accept that their leader, once wise and able, had long faded into distant memory. Their king had changed. Herkufshorn's increasing eccentricity made Litanians fear him, but also drew a following of fanatic worshippers. People dared not call him by his true name, and in time, Herkufshorn became known as the Witch King. You know what he was doing though when he withdrew? He was studying arts and oranginium. That's how he became the strongest caster. He had to ponder that orb. The Gaulish-Litanian War of 1029 shook Terra to her core. Millions fought in the war that lasted 2 years, ending in the destruction of the Empire of Gaul. The war left Litania devastated despite her victory. But the Witch King's iron-fisted rule grew even harsher, casting dark clouds over the country that was already on the brink of destitution. So, the Witch King never appeared without his mask during the last years of his reign. There had even been speculation that there was in fact no face beneath the mask. No one was able to confirm whether or not the Witch King had a face, but many saw the face of speculators ripped off in public. It seems unlikely that the Witch King himself paid much attention to such trifling offenses, but countless atrocities were committed in the Witch King's name by his fanatical followers. And we have the Genesis horn here. The Witch King was as mysterious as the arts he wielded. Early in his political career, he stopped using his real name and took the name Herkufshorn, meaning Genesis horn, in Litania, more of a title than an epitaph. It is said that the Witch King had imbued his true name with such power that those who utter the name gain his wisdom and insight when casting. The true name was known only to the Witch King and those who were closest to him, and it will soon be lost to time if it has not been already. And then someone wrote here, I don't know if that's Calcit's handwriting, someone wrote here though, Herkufshorn's birth name was Otto Deitnar, is that an N? Gustav von Urtica. I actually did know he was a von Urtica. But the rest of his name, Otto, I still don't know if that's in Deitnar, Gustav. Duo Concertante. The Witch King shut himself away in the last few decades of his reign, virtually cutting off all communication with the outside. This gave the Kurfürsten an opportunity to retake political power. The nobles once again had authority over their own holdings, and negotiation between the Kurfürsten once again became a common method of resolving matters between different domains. The Kurfürstenhof regained its supreme authority. On the other hand, a relaxing of censorship was evident. Art forms that were previously considered banal, substandard, immoral, or meaningless under the Witch King became permissible again. and artists once again had the freedom to operate outside the Witch King's iron fist. Many of the artists and politicians that emerged during this period remain highly influential to this day. Most prominent amongst them are the twins, Liselotte and Hildegard, the future twin empresses. They first made their names as the youngest concert masters in history, then proceeded to take up the banner of opposition to the Witch King's supporters. At the peak of his power, the Witch King and his followers would never have permitted the rise of such a faction. But by this time, the Witch King had lost his hold over the government, and his iron grip on Litania was greatly weakened. The twins were not even punished for their defiance. Instead, they became honored guests at many of Kurfürst's palaces. As the Witch King's grip loosened, the Kurfürsten saw hope for Litania. They now had a chance to take action and end the chaos that was the Witch King spawned. They believed that Litania would be free from tyranny once the Witch King's spire was toppled. In September 1077, with the support of the Kurfürsten, the twins suddenly appeared near the capital with the coalition army from multiple Kreis, engaging in battle against the capital garrison and the Witch King's followers. The September Aufstand began. Things started well for the Kurfürsten's forces, who proceeded to march upon the capital. But just as they thought the Witch King's madness was so advanced that he could no longer perceive a war on his doorsteps, the light of Orangenium arts shone atop his spire, and for the first time in decades, Litania saw the arts that had once paralyzed the greatest armies of Gaul. Thousands of coalition soldiers were turned to ash before they ever saw a glimpse of the capital. Dang. That's awesome. Emboldened by the strength of their master, the Witch King's followers fought back with renewed strength, eroding the coalition's initial gains. 6 separate offenses against the capital were all repelled by the Witch King's arts and followers, and the situation began to grow desperate. Soldiers died in droves before a torrent of arts with not the slightest progress to show for it. Doubt and despair began to spread to the coalition camp. Perhaps it was always futile to challenge the Witch King. As the revolution teetered on the edge, the twins came up with a desperate gambit. Leading a small elite force, they infiltrated the capital under the cover of night. While a feint attack by the main force provided a diversion, the elites made straight for the Witch King's spire, penetrating the Witch King's 22 art wards. They climbed to the top and confronted them. There was no witnesses to the duel, only the aftermath. At the break of dawn, the light of arts atop the spire finally went out. The reign of the Witch King Litania came to an end. The defeat of the Witch King took the twins' fame and renown to new heights. Despite the lack of precedence and tradition, the Kurfürsten voted unanimously to elect the twins as the new leaders of Litania, becoming the twin empresses. They immediately set about healing the wounds of the old king's rule. The Witch King's spire was toppled, and the dark cloud that hung over the ancient empire began to disperse at last. That's pretty cool. I don't think they've talked about, like, yeah, the twins overthrew the emperor. I don't think they've ever really described the battle itself, though. The Witch King just vaporizing the army is crazy. Very cool. We have a very long paragraph by Katzit. The Witch King's insanity stemmed directly from his long-term research into Orangenium and life itself. In a sense, he may have actually stumbled onto the true essence of Orangenium. However, The Witch King's enduring tyranny at home forced some newly empowered Kurfürsten to unite and conspire against him. One of the heroes of the War of the Four Nations, I think that's Großherzog Leopold, orchestrated a series of covert operations combining Gaul's technology with Litania's Orangenium arts in hopes of finding a way to defeat the Witch King. This plan ultimately gave birth to the Twin Empresses, though Leopold himself did not live to witness the Witch King's downfall. Litania's unique modern-day political structure is essentially the result of the power struggle between the Twin Empresses and the Kurfürsten. Historical records reveal that the Kurfürsten devoted considerable effort to grooming the Twin Empresses, equipping them with not only exceptional arts, but also sharp political skills. As time passed by, the Kurfürsten found that the twin swords they forged could not be wreath-sheathed. They watched helplessly as the Zwillingssturm rose in the distance. The Zwillingssturm is the twin spires of the empresses. Today, the name of the capital, Zwillingssturm, and its eponymous spires have become enduring symbols of resentment among the Kurfürsten. Of course, here are the pictures of the twin empresses. Also, first of all, yes, Kalsit says he might have stumbled upon the true essence of Orangenium. He did. The Witch King found out what Orangenium actually is and the nature of life on Terra, and he found out everything. But more interesting, so this guy, Großherzog Leopold, orchestrated a series of covert operations combining Gaul's technology with Litanian Orangenium arts in the hope of finding a way to defeat the Witch King. This plan ultimately gave birth to the Twin Empresses. And then it talks about the Kurfürsten was grooming them and equipped them with the arts and everything. Are the Twin Empresses like homunculi? Are they not actual humans? This is news to me. Unless it was mentioned or hinted at somewhere in one of the events, I don't recall that. If that's what that is implying, that's news to me. I guess it would make sense in a way, because like they don't have a history of like where they came from. They just showed up. Don't know if we'll get any more of that. That's interesting. Geography. Litania sits at the center of Terra and borders multiple core states, with Victoria to the southwest, Syracusa and Kasdal to the east, Ursus to the north. A long mountain range runs the length of Litania, higher to the northeast and southwest, and lower in the center, creating a corridor that connects Kaji-Mersch and Syracusa. The scattered river valleys and plains among the mountains were where the tribal civilizations began to settle down and transform into the first towns and the Mac cities. Litania's climate is mild, with 4 distinct seasons. The forests that cover Litania are temperate species with clear seasonal characteristics. Got a nice Litania town. Litania continues to favor wood as their preferred material, even in modern times. Lumbering is an important source of income for many forest villages. Prevailing stereotypes have caused some to believe that Litanians use Orangenium arts to cut down trees. As a matter of fact, they use axes just like everybody else. Politics and military. Regime. Litania employs a form of elective monarchy, a political system that shows clear Sargonian influence, but one that has since evolved unique characteristics of its own. Despite the imperial moniker, Litania functions more like a federation. The 9 territories that form Litania are known as the Kurfürstenkreis, or simply Kreis, which are ruled by the Kurfürsten. The Kaiser of Litania is elected from the Kurfürsten by the Kurfürsten themselves. The Kaiser, or Kaiserin, is in theory extremely powerful. He, or she, currently they, has supreme powers of interpretation of all Litania laws except for the Constitution, and there is no formal oversight on imperial authority. In practical terms, however, imperial authority is heavily restricted by the Kurfürsten, who often reject the Kaiser's interpretation by citing the articles of the Constitution. I guess that explains why the Kurfürsten also mint their own coins. It's more like a federation. That being said, I mean, there are federations in real life that obviously don't have separate coinage. They, again, usually try and keep coinage minting to the central government. And yes, the Twin Empresses. The Twin Empresses enjoyed tremendous support from the upper classes upon their ascension to the throne. These portraits were painted by a minor noble as a gift to the Empresses. Like many other objects, it was rejected by the Empress's voice on security grounds. And I believe Lieselota is the blonde and Hildegard is the black-haired. Honestly, I'm surprised they don't actually say that. Oh, do we have a continuation? By citing articles of the Constitution. Hold on. Which clearly say that the essence of Litania lies in the union of the Kreis, to defend the interests of each Kreis. Therefore, the Kaiser's powers have historically always been limited. Oh, we have a section of the Gulden Gestadt. I'm glad. I was wondering. The Gulden Gestadt is very neat. But first, government. When the imperial crown is passed due to death or abdication, a Kurfürst is elected to the throne, and the central government of the empire is moved to the seat of the corresponding Kreis. Oh, okay. Also, is it Kreis? I was saying Kreis. Is it? I don't know which one it is. I'm gonna look it up. Also, apparently means circle. And it was actually, it is or was a real administrative division. I did not know that, actually. I'm honestly surprised I never heard of that. But the EI always throws me off in German. I can never quite remember if it's I or E. Or, yeah.
Kreise.
It is I. Okay, I was right. I was, however, wrong about not saying Kreise, the E at the end. Although the E is not there. Is that a plural thing? Maybe. Yeah, the E it makes it plural. Okay, so it's Kreis or Kreise. Okay. Anyway. A new central government is formed from the Kurfürst officials. Therefore, the Kaiser of Lithuania is the ruler of his Kreis first and Emperor of Lithuania second. This has caused the Kaisers to prioritize the interests of their own Kreise over national interests in their policies and administration. That's actually interesting. I like that they also... Yeah, so the capital always changes just based on who's elected. Neat. The imperial court, the central government of Lithuania, is a development of the Kurfürstenhof, the Kurfürst's court prior to his election as Kaiser. It assists in the Kaiser's policies, communicates with the Kaiser's will, and protects the Kaiser's safety. As mentioned above, each Kaiser picks his own officials, who usually come from his former Kurfürstenhof or inner circle. The Kaiser, who usually comes from, the Kaiser also keeps the Imperial Guard. Under the rule of the twin empresses, they are known as the Empress's voice. The first priority of an Empress's voice is to serve as the Empress's imperial musician and then their messenger and protector. A Kurfürstenhof shares many of the same institutions with the imperial court and with each other, including the Kurfürstguard and the Gestattwache, who are responsible for upholding the constitution. A Kurfürst government has two parallel seats of officials, the vassalage composed of local nobility and the civil officials who run the government. The former answer only to their direct suzerain, while the latter answer to the Kurfürst. In every Kreis, nobles at various levels manage local matters in their respective administrative subdivision. Administrative divisions. The primary division of Lithuania are her 9 Wahlbezirke, the same concept as the previously mentioned Kurfürstenkreis, Kreise or Kreise, and each ruled by a Kurfürst. The Guldengestats, established when the Lithuanian Empire was founded, defines it as a union of the Kurfürstkreise, granting them significant authority. Each Kurfürstenkreis maintains comprehensive governmental structures, including its own laws and military. However, the legal system and military structures of the Kurfürstenkreis are largely similar due to the requirements of both cultural and administrative consistency throughout the empire, with only minor variations to address local needs. The Kurfürsten are able to form their own government and military draft laws and confer noble status. They are the political, military, cultural, and even spiritual leaders of their own territory, often enjoying greater authority than the Kaiser in their Kurfürstenkreise. As each of the Kurfürstenkreise have often defied the Kaiser's will throughout history, prioritizing their local interests. So, Kurfürstenkreise, Lithuania consists of 9 of them: Heldenswert, Einwald, Erdenher, Lupukan, Sturmland, Wasserland, Fortsgard, Ostenheim, and Kaprania. I believe... I can't remember. Is it Einwald? I have to look this up. No, I was completely wrong. Sturmland is where Viviana Drost is from. Any fans of the Kazimierz Major? Einwald has been mentioned. I think Erdenheer has been mentioned. Not maybe Wasserland too, but the other ones I'm not sure. But Sturmland has been mentioned because of Viviana. The Law. The Gulden Gestats, a title very much suited to the Empire's culture, is the Constitution of Litania, drafted by the 9 tribes and Syracuse at the time of its founding. It confers the power to rule upon the Kaiser and forms the legal basis of the Litanian Empire. Each Kurfürstenkreise legislates its own laws, guided by the ethical foundation of the Gulden Gestats. In practice, the laws of the Kurfürstenkreise are largely similar due to the common background in culture, society, and environment, differing only in minute details. They all exist to serve one goal: maintaining order in society and protecting the privilege of the nobility. Let's talk about the Gulden Gestats. Let's see what they explain here. The Gulden Gestats is the Constitution of Litania, drafted by the 9 founding tribes along with Syracuse. United by music and having established a cultural identity, these groups came together under the leadership of one of the tribes to draft this constitution at the empire's founding. The 3 movements, which can be performed as actual music, depict the birth of the empire, define the role of government and the Kurfürstenkreise, and set out the moral and ethical frameworks for the empire, respectively. There are 10 copies of the Gulden Gestats, each entrusted to one of the 9 Kurfürstenkreise and the Syracuse Autonomous Region. The Gulden Gestats is performed by the Reich Orchester, Imperial Orchestra, at the coronation of a new Kaiser and other important imperial occasions. The Gulden Gestats has remained virtually unchanged in history of Litania, with the exception of the deletion of the contents regarding the Syracuse Autonomous Region when the Witch King ascended to the throne. A complete performance of the Gulden Gestats takes hours and is rarely performed in its entirety. Recordings are said to be a good sleep aid, but excerpts are often performed at formal occasions. That picture was drawn by messenger Gerald Erdica. Okay, so they didn't explain the one thing I was hoping for, mainly because I wanted to see if they would explain it better than my understanding currently is. But yeah, the Gulden Gestats is the Constitution, and it's also music, but it's also magical. It has like an actual like magical, I guess a compulsion to like follow it, to maintain it. In some way, or at least like it's weird. See, my understanding of it, at least how they described it in one of the events, I was hoping they'd maybe explain it better here, but yeah, they don't. It's kind of strange, but really neat sounding. Because to change it is not just like they say the Witch King removed the section of Syracuse. It wasn't just like, oh, he just removed the paper or just deleted the words. Like he had to perform arts, Orangenium arts, to edit the Gulden Gestats without like destroying the rest of the spell components entwined with this music. The music, the ritual of performing the music was also important for the Villingströma event and everything that happened during that. But yeah, it seems to have, to me at least, and how it might work, is that there is some sort of, it's magical. Because music and arts in Litania are pretty much always hand in hand. So the Constitution is a song, but also therefore it is arts, and there is a magic when you are performing it. Which might involve some sort of compulsion that if it was to be destroyed, perhaps the identity of Litania both, would literally be destroyed in some way. Yeah. Very interesting. I like it. I was trying to see if I could find any better explanation. There's not much. It's it's a bit vague, but yeah. I think it's cool that there's this idea that it's not just a constitution and it's not just music, which is in and of itself a cool constitution sort of thing, but it's also this actual magical spell that maintains the fabric of Litanian society and thanks for the follow. And is actual, and a ritual that can cause damage or promote unity. Literal damage, literal unity. Like, now we have the aristocracy. The 7 classes of Litanian nobility were established alongside the institution of the empire, forming her ruling class. The nobility is closely associated with the spires, where they live, teach, and manage their holdings. Thus, they are also known as nobles of the spires, as defined by the constitution. The highest level of nobility is the Kaiser, who is the absolute ruler of the empire in theory, but in practice, an elected Kaiser's power is often much limited by the authority of the Kurfürsten. The second rank of nobility under the Kaiser is the Kurfürsten, a title that formerly referred to the leaders of the 9 major tribes of the founding of the nation, excluding Syracusa. We're getting a lot of good detail, but they also kind of repeat that same line over and over again. It's a bit redundant. Yes, but we're getting a lot of good government detail here. Are you reading Arknights lore? You know we are. I love Arknights. They are the highest authority in their own Kurfürstenkreise, and where the actual power of the empire lies. The term Kurfürsten is often mistranslated as Duke, Grand Duke, or Prince in other countries, an accurate interpretation stemming from the cultural differences. The Kurfürsten have tended to hold more actual power than the Kaiser. and their status actually surpasses that of the Victorian dukes and the Erskine Grand Dukes. The third level are the Markgrafen, a cognate with the Victorian Marquesses, who began as large landowners assisting their Kurfürsten in administrating the vast expanses of each Kurfürstenkreis. The fourth level are the Grafen, akin to Victorian earls, nobles who own manors and engage in large-scale production. Most factories in Litania are owned by Grafen. It is the highest level of nobility that can be conferred upon a commoner, in the rare case when a commoner has earned the merit by demonstrating exceptional valor or extraordinary achievement in Orangenium arts. They are followed by the Weisgrafen, Viscounts, and Bernen. The distinction between the two is largely theoretical, and most must partake in some form of trade or to sustain themselves. At the bottom is the Alder, simply noble, roughly the equivalent of the Ursine Dvorianin. It is a non-hereditary title that carries no practical, political, or military significance and is conferred to awarded commoners for their achievements in society. The Kurfürsten are able to confer the title of Markgraf, and each subsequent rank of nobility can confer noble titles lower than their own, down to Adler. Each noble answers to the higher rank noble that conferred their rank. Apparently, the powers of nobility are diminished with each rank, leaving virtually no actual authority at the Edler or Adler level. On the other hand, the Kaiser is elected by the Kurfürsten. It is with the Kurfürsten that Litania's authority actually lies. Military. The military system of Litanian Empire comprises the private armies of the nobility. The size of the private army that each level of nobility can have is strictly regulated by law. In times of war, each noble in the command is a commander of his own army, while answering to his superior nobles and obeying their commands. Casters enjoy special status in the military thanks to Litania's remarkable mastery of arts, and they are the focus of any noble as he develops his own army. Moreover, since Litanians are among the best casters in Terra, even laymen are typically able to use Orangenium arts and might become very proficient casters with proper training, surpassing the regular casters of other nations. As such, Litanian units often consist entirely of arts users. The arts of the Gestaltwache are said to turn the night sky to day, performing a powerful force greatly feared by other nations. And what are the Gestaltwache? Litania's military arts research and training system is one of a kind. Individual nobles train their troops in different ways, but all soldiers must go through an aptitude test for military arts. Those who perform well on the test are removed from the rank and file and sent to receive special training, becoming the Gestaltwache, Law Guardians, the strongest unit in the Kurfürsten armies. Wearing heavy armor and wielding Zweihander, two-handed greatswords, these powerful casters are not merely deadly individual combatants, short to medium range in number. The communion casting they perform rains ferocious destructive arts upon the enemy, summoning or spelling doom for anyone foolish enough to stand in their way. They're pretty cool. And this is a Gestaltwache arms and armor during the War of the Four Nations, Terran Musology 1089. The greatsword is the signature weapon of the Gestaltwache, but its form can differ greatly depending on the era and the Kurfürst, and at times can be barely recognizable as a sword. Litanians describe the communion casting of the Gestaltwache as a grand symphony, with weapons of different forms performing the functions of different instruments. The blunt point, unedged sword depicted in the image is typically described as a percussion instrument designed to counter the Gaulish heavy phalanx. It played an important role in the War of the Four Nations. Neat. The most elite unit in the Litanian army, however, is the Kaiser's Imperial Guard, which accepts only the most distinguished candidates and provides them with the finest training and equipment. Strictly speaking, the Imperial Guard is part of the Imperial Court and not bound by the laws of the Kurfürstenkreise, answering only to the Kaiser. This can be seen as a privilege that distinguishes the Kaiser from the Kurfürsten. The economy. As one of the core traditional powers, Litanian developed highly advanced agriculture in her river valleys during the early days of the empire. Their proficiency with Originium arts has allowed them to develop agriculture in hilly regions with as much effectiveness as on flat land. I guess they'd never heard of terrace farming. The passion that Litania has for culture and the arts is well known. The first art galleries and concert halls on Terra were built in Litania, and it is where the greatest of such institutions are located. In modern times, Litania has absorbed new technologies from her neighbors, in particular Victoria, and integrated them into her robust economic foundation and Originium arts traditions. She quickly developed mature industry chains in the Crystal Age, building a solid foundation for the war against Gaul. The Gaulish-Litania War, the War of the Four Nations, and the reign of the Witch King have left the empire devastated, however, and she is still recovering from these wounds. The Litanian economy has relied on Originium arts since the very beginning. With Originium arts and resources largely under the control of nobles, most industries in Litania are closely linked to the nobility. Things are produced by the nobles, and for the nobles too. Litania's not doing well, and honestly, by the 12th century, I don't think they're still not going to be doing well. But to be fair, the 12th century sucks for everyone. But if there's any hope that maybe they could recover, probably not yet. If at all. What is this over here? A graduation gift from the Arts Spire, the winding shape symbolizing the climb up the spire. The average Litania family could hardly afford an ornament like this, much less the expensive tuition at the spire. And Litanian products. Products manufactured in Litania are highly distinctive, regardless of size and form. Designs of nobles seem to assume that all buyers are proficient in Originium arts. This has made Litanian exports rather unpopular in the past. With the deepening of international exchanges and the improvement of design standards, modern Litanian industrial products now often adapt a dual-track design, having two sets of mechanisms internally. Users who are not proficient in arts can operate them via the purely mechanical one, while users proficient in arts are able to perform complex operations by simply casting via the other. This is a Litanian gramophone. If you play Arknights, you're familiar with gramophones. It can be operated by hand, but this is considered uncouth, especially amongst the upper class. Thus, Litanian nobles less proficient in the arts are typically accompanied by a servant who operates the equipment for them. Wow. It's a big chapter. I feel like it's bigger than like Victoria, but maybe not. Probably the same size. Culture and society. Litanian society is inextricably intertwined with Originium arts and cultural arts. It was Originium arts and the artistic culture that united the Litanians and founded the empire, be it for the continuation of Originium arts a search for elegance or opening up new possibilities for Litanian and Terra as a whole. The nobles of Litania harbor high and lofty ideals. Their spires are the bases where they teach Originium arts to commoners, instruct them on culture, and continuously strive to improve their own arts. This is a mentality that has permeated Litania for thousands of years. Or just 1,000 years, actually. From the Kaiser to the Edler. The tight association of arts and culture with the fundamental institutions of Litania has fostered an atmosphere of learning, making her Terra's foremost center of academic study. Education has therefore become the Empire's most prominent industry. Schools at all levels, from kindergarten to universities, can be found all across the Empire. Some have evolved from the spires, some are built around the spires, and others are the spires themselves. Schools where the most advanced subjects are taught have higher ranks, and only nobles have the privilege and the ability to study and teach the most esoteric knowledge. A school's rank is easily determined by her external features, such as the height of the spire and its magnificence. The cost of education goes up with each level, and only the most well-to-do nobles can afford advanced education. This is the historical percentage of Litanians from different social classes who earn degrees. Before the Witch King, only 7% of commoners earned a degree. Before the War of the Four Nations, that increased to 35%. But by the time of the first decade of the Twin Empresses, that shrank down to 12%. That's interesting. But that kind of is missing something, because we have did that number, that number was probably shrinking before the first 10 years. Although, maybe not. Maybe the Witch King's era was actually better for commoners and all. It's interesting. Well, Originium arts and the arts that have prominent position in Litania education. Originium arts form the basis of the curriculum, and students who wish to pursue further studies in any field must first achieve a passing grade in Originium arts. Students who fail to meet these standards who are graded as artistically deficient may be unable to graduate or even face expulsion from school. The schools are also administered by the nobility. The professor that I studied under as a doctoral student at Wilhelm Herzog University each had their own spires, in recognition of their achievements in their respective fields. We have Ludwig the Bachelor. Ludwig the Bachelor ruled over the Kreis Einwald from 300 to 360. Or no, 300 and 360 years ago. Not from 300. Incredibly passionate about knowledge and the arts, he saw it as his duty to pass on his knowledge to others. A duty even more important than ruling. He accepted any Litanian student willing to learn, regardless of upbringing, established the first university spire in Litania. He believed that when everyone gained the most supreme knowledge, the land would never again impede Litania. I agree. He enjoyed widespread support amongst Litanian commoners and was considered the favorite to become the next Kaiser. His abrupt madness and death on the eve of the imperial election remains one of the biggest unsolved mysteries of the Empire. Commemorative events are held on a regular basis at Utica, where Ludwig's grave is located. And down here we have a arts unit previously used by Cherney, sketched by an apprentice at an Oropathy clinic in Afterglow. That's Cherney. Oh, I thought that was a microphone. No, that's Cherney's weapon. All right. Let's talk about Cherney. Just pulling up. That's Journey's, yeah. That's his whole weapon there. That shows you the scale of what that is. So Latonians habitually look for solutions in Orange Enigma arts with the help of the famous musician William Fitzjourney, the Afterglow. Weissenheim's infected quarter has begun using Orange Enigma arts to mitigate certain symptoms of oropathy. Nice. Yeah, so Cherney's a famous musician. He's an infected, but his musical skill has allowed him to enjoy more prestige and privilege among the nobility who will look away from his infected status because they like his music. He helped out a lot in Weissenheim, as this even talks about, which was the infected quarter. And he remains famous enough that he remained famous enough that his music is archived in Infield. If any of you play Infield, he's there too. Well, not there, but he's mentioned at one point. So he's pretty famous. So, up here, continuing on, culture and society. Lithuania places particular emphasis on their love of music, but archaeological finds indicate that the pre-Empire tribe shared far more interest in common than just music, such as poems and paintings with similar forms and styles. We can therefore infer that the Lithuanians began sharing a common culture even earlier than they claim. This conclusion was inferred from the countless ancient documents and artifacts that all show clear traces of Orange Enigma arts, which also demonstrates that the use of arts goes back even further. The Lithuanians' never-ending veneration of knowledge and art is a very curious phenomenon on Terra, not to mention the fact that they are naturally more attuned to Orange Enigma arts and other forms of arts than other races. Thus, the Empire enjoys a long legacy of elegance. The love that Lithuanians have for the culture is restrained and reserved. They prefer to express their passions through art rather than speech and eloquence. In particular, Lithuanian classical music. Discussions on music, philosophy, and Orange Enigma arts can be found everywhere. As an outdoor music performance, music is everywhere in Lithuania all the time, even during the reign of the Witch King. Lithuania has a population of 32 million. Nice. Of which around 10 million live in the nomadic cities. Because Lithuania society is found upon Orange Enigma arts, it is somewhat more tolerant to oropathy sufferers than other countries. It does not mean that the infected are not discriminated against. For example, they are forced to live in segregated communities by local governments in order to facilitate management. Yeah. So Lithuania has 32 million. I forget what they said. Victoria had. Is Victoria more populous? Probably, I would imagine. Am I gonna find that quickly? Now, you think it would be listed in the same section, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I'll have to look for that. I want to keep track of that. Oh, no, here we go. Okay. I was like, the wiki didn't have it, but I did find it. Victoria's 40 million. So Victoria's got not much more, but more population. $8 million more people. Not a whole lot more. Let's read this Litanian opera first. Litanian opera is the pinnacle of Litanian culture. A combination of various arts forms, including music, literature, painting, etc. From the libretto to the composition, the instruments to the performance, and the opera house itself, Orangenium arts permeate every stage of producing an authentic Litanian opera. It can be regarded as a concentrated array of school divination Orangenium arts, capable of conveying potent emotions directly to the audience. Schools have theorized that this is the reason Litanian opera is particularly mesmerizing. In the 2 decades following the fall of the Witch King, numerous operas based on his story were created and performed in secret, depicting the Witch King as the greatest sovereign in Litanian history. You know what? I bet the Gulden Gestats would be divination, maybe, in the same way. I forgot about our arts schools, which we discussed in, like, what was that, chapter 2 or something. Yeah, so divination encompasses a broad range of abilities from like psychic enhancement, mind control. Yeah, the Gulden Gestats is definitely divination arts. So the Constitution itself is a form of like, yeah, psychic arts. That's a good way to actually explain it. And apparently, Calcit's got a lot to say about the opera. Even though more than 20 years have passed since the Witch King's death, a significant number of his supporters still operate in the shadows within Litania, working to overthrow the Twin Empresses. Although the Empire has flourished under the Witch King's leadership, the destruction he brought to Litania far surpassed that of any previous Kaiser. So why do the people of modern-day Litania still act in his name? This may be tied to the social climate that has shaped Litania for centuries. Litania has always been gifted with supremely talented people, but due to its chaotic administration system and fiercely competitive society, only a select few have been able to fully unleash their abilities. The Witch King was the most exceptional among them. Litanians revered the Witch King as a powerful caster and a wise ruler, but also because he embodied the Litanian vision of what the talent could achieve, or what true talent could achieve. In conclusion, an imperial symphony. Born out of Orangenium arts, the magical country of Litania has seen both awe-inspiring miracles and tremendous leadership. With the dark clouds that once loomed over her gone, and a new dawn on the horizon, How will Titania continue to write her own symphony? That's it. Next chapter. Next section is Ursus. How much is this? Wow. Oh my goodness, it keeps going. It keeps going. Wow, it's pretty long. There's a lot to say about Ursus. It's a big place. Well, we still have an hour, so we'll keep going. But I don't think we'll finish all of it because it is there's a lot for Ursus. We'll see what we can learn here. Ursus. We started in Ursus. We're back in Ursus. Seems like a lot of political stuff is about to happen in Ursus. I think it's going to be pretty exciting, actually. Let's learn about the founding of Ursus. We know a little bit about it. We know that it started as the Hippogriff Kingdom, Empire, Hippogriff, whatever. So, epigraph. My old friend, the poet Oleg Rublev, spoke on his new book, Pod Oblakami, Under the Clouds, as we conversed before the fireplace. We arrived at the new era with joy and apprehension in our hearts, paying respects to the beauty of the past and the glory of the future. Even as we feel overwhelmed and bewildered, we seek to build a new era, to learn from the deeds of our forefathers. But the ghosts of the past linger with us. We haven't even distinguished the difference between them and ourselves. I have dreamt that I was I, and lit my poems to illuminate my surroundings, only to find nothing but broken blades and dead bodies. I have dreamt that I was a child full of joy with my entire life ahead of me. After going into exile in 1075, he spent the next 15 years traveling across Terra, passing away in Victoria in 1090. He never returned to Ursus. Overview. Also, that's just that, what is that cathedral called? I forget. The Empire of Ursus is an established power located in the north of Terra. Known for its harsh environment, hardy folk, and strong military, this land once belonged to the Hippogriff Kingdom of the Liberi Elders. 1,000 years ago, the legendary hero Igor led the Ursus to overthrow the Hippogriffs. They named their new country the Empire of Ursus after their own race. For the 1,000 years, the Empire maintained a staunch military tradition, the saber of Ursus cutting a path through Terra, guided by the descendants of Igor Velecki. Today, however, the Empire stands at a crossroads threatened by significant political and social crises. And we have the official language, of course, is Ursine. The dominant group is, of course, Ursus. The currency is Chervonets. An Ursine Chervonets gold coin minted in 1034 by the order of Tsar Vladimir Ivanovich. During his reign, the imperial power of Ursus reached its zenith. History. Founding of Ursus. The history of this region goes back much further than Ursus. The first civilization in the North Mountains of Terra was founded by Liberi elders fleeing the Sarkaz threat. They called themselves the Hippogriffs, and named their land the Hippogriff Kingdom. Hippogriff nobles lived in hilltop castles high in the mountains, taking the people down below as inferior races and recruiting the ancients as their servants and soldiers. In effect, serfs. Most prominent among these ancients were the Ursus, who migrated to the north to live with the Liberi Hippogriffs. These hardy people took to the harsh environment of the north quicker than the Hippogriffs. They were rewarded with harder work. For centuries, rage brewed in the hearts of the Ursus, until the Knights Mora Coggan's army set foot in the Hippogriff land. The ragtag defense that the Hippogriff nobles hastily organized out of the Ursus, whom they had already bled dry, quickly collapsed, and the Knights Mora rampaged unchecked. The weakness and cowardice of the Hippogriffs was apparent, and at long last the Ursus realized that there was no threat or no future in serving them. Scattered rebellions broke out after the Knights Mora Coggan armies moved on. The Hippogriffs recognized the unrest in their kingdom, but cared little about solving their domestic problems, nor did they have the capability to do so. Revolution began to brew beneath the noses of the Hippogriff nobles, led by the Ursus officer who would become known as Igor the Great. This is very, very inspired by history. The different, Russian principalities before there was a united Russia. Different principalities there were invaded at one point by Mongols and became tributary states to them. The Knights Mora, of course, being analogous to the Mongols. Igor was one of the few non-hippogriffs to be elevated to a position of command. Conscripted at a young age, he started out as little more than an errand boy, but soon displayed extraordinary combat skill and talent for command, earning him a promotion into the officer ranks. His military exploits won him the recognition of hippogriff nobles and reputation amongst the linemen and Ursus. His position was convenient for the revolution's early plans, giving him access to both men and information. When revolution broke out, he proved a charismatic leader and outstanding soldier, triumphing over the hippogriffs time and again. More Ursus flocked to Igor's banner with each victory, determined to take ownership of the land that they tilled for the hippogriffs. In the year 31, after 4 years of fierce fighting, deity Grifferberg, capital of the Hippogriff Kingdom, finally fell to the revolutionary army. Following in the Hippogriff's footsteps, the Ursus named their new country after themselves, and the empire of Ursus was born in deity Grifferberg. Igor was crowned Tsar, Emperor, in deity Grifferberg, with the full support of his officers. Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't rename deity Grifferberg. Could have called it deity Ursusburg or something. Which does not sound nearly as good, to be fair. Tsar Igor. Tsar Igor the Great is undoubtedly a legendary hero in Ursus. Over the course of 1,000 years, his many names have been passed down through the generations. Some say this great warrior was a gift sent to Ursus by Terra herself, which is why his name was Igor Ursus. Others claim he was a humble peasant of humble peasant origins, and thus he was named with the patronymic Igor Borisovich. Old records suggest that the Hippogriff king added a true surname to the end of Igor's name, but the additional name was soon abandoned by Igor's son after Igor's passing, and that was the point of the three-name structure of modern Ursine names, or the origin even. The most well-known of Igor's many names is Igor Latsisar, a military title bestowed upon him by the Hippogriff, meaning the Bear Raiser. This title granted him command over the Ursine armies during the founding wars. Under this new epitaph, Igor led his forces with unmatched strength. Later literary and artistic works would often refer to him by this name, cementing it in Ursus' collective memory. When modern Ursine invoke the name Latsisar, they are calling for a fearless commander to lead them to victory. When Igor ascended to the throne, he declared himself Lord of the Empire of Ursus and the Empire of Hippogriff, King of the Northern Land, Ruler of the Tundra, First Champion, and the Rebel. These titles established a practice of referring to the Hippogriff Kingdom as a constituent empire within Ursus, likely to legitimize the new empire founded by a rebel army. In reality, what the Hippogriffs ruled was undoubtedly a kingdom, and only the Ursus referred to it as the Hippogriff Empire. That must be why I was like, is it a kingdom, is it an empire? Because the Ursus would call it empire, but it wasn't. It's interesting that they actually kept it around in their title. A history of conquest. Expansion has been a constant throughout the history of Ursus. The land that Igor took from the Hippogriff comprised only the hills in the central region of the modern empire. The rest of its vast expanses came as a result of 1,000 years of conquest. Actually, before I continue, did they... Where is... I thought they had another name for Igor. I thought they said it here. Yeah, Igor Velecki. Is that a different Igor? What is that name for Igor? It wasn't listed in his names here. Is that a different Igor? I don't know. Anyway. Igor the Great's first act after taking the throne was not to rebuild the empire, but to lead a campaign against Hippogriff remnants who refused to accept his rule. In order to ensure stability and security for his people, the task was not accomplished in Igor's lifetime. He died in his tent during the long campaign against Hippogriff remnants in the eastern mountains, a stalemate that lasted more than 2 decades. His mantle was taken up by his eldest son, Alexei Igorovich. It was under Alexei the Young that the Eastern Campaign became the keystone of the Empire's strategy, with the ultimate goal of eliminating the Hippogriff remnants that continued to harass Ursus. It took 3 generations and nearly a century to accomplish this goal. Over the next millennium, the expansion of the Ursus Empire would follow in the mold of the Eastern Campaign, as the descendants of Igor the Great pointed their swords toward the rest of Terra. The Sword of Ursus does not discriminate when the Empire's armies are on the march. An Ursine invasion means wanton devastation, wealth plundered, land occupied, and culture destroyed. Many civilizations were wiped from history, leaving nothing behind. What other civilizations? That's interesting. We don't get a lot of other countries. We know about, like, there is the Tri-City Federation or whatever. What other countries were there? The Sword of Ursus cut them off at the source, until all that remained in the north of Terra was the Ursine war cry. In order to survive, the Sami tribes that once inhabited the northwest region of modern-day Ursus were forced to migrate to the northernmost point of Terra, near the Imphi ice field, where nothing bad ever happened. Not all of Empire's conquests went smoothly, as seen when they encountered Kazimierz during their expansion into the west. Kazimierz's origins were similar to Ursus, but Ursus was no answer, or had no answer for Kazimierz's elite knightly orders. The Ursine armies, consisting of poorly trained recruits equipped with outdated weaponry, suffered heavy losses on their first clash against Kazimierz. Moreover, due to Ursus's outdated logistics system inherited from the Hippogriffs, the supplies being transported to the front lines were significantly inadequate. These two factors combined led to Ursus's defeat in the First Ursus-Kazimierz War. So consequently, this crushing defeat also led to sweeping military and political reforms across Ursus, including the formal establishment of a parliamentary system, administrative regions, and a code of war, or code of law, rather. Ursus doesn't have a code of war. With the newfound vigor, the Ursine war machine would challenge Kazimierz repeatedly over the next several centuries. Victory or defeat, Ursus's thirst for expansion would not be quenched, leading to a long and virtually uninterrupted legacy of warfare. Subsequent czars would reform the empire and military in different ways, but certain things never change. The imperial army continued to grow, the empire continued to expand, and the power of nobles of military service continued to increase. Over here we have the young Tsar. Alexei the Young ascended to the throne at just 16 years old. How could someone so young, still on the cusp of adulthood, impose his will to guide an empire through war, let alone implement policies that would endure for a century? A more plausible theory is that, in the early years of Alexei's reign, real power was in the hand of Igor's generals, and they were the driving force behind the eastern expansion strategy. However, Alexei proved to be a capable warrior, securing the foundation for a long and stable reign at a very young age. The practice of sending the Ursine heir for military training began with Alexei and was followed by future czars. They believed that this practice, drawn from the experience of their ancestors, would ensure the empire's continued victories. And then, the Great Rebellion. Even during the reign of the previous Tsar, there were telling signs of what would eventually become the Great Rebellion, an event that shook the empire to its core. Tsar Vladimir Ivanovich had fought in the War of the Four Nations, witnessing firsthand the incredible productivity of Gaulish Orangenium technology. The technology that Ursus took from Gaul at the conclusion of the war ushered in a golden era for the Ursine war machine, which Tsar Vladimir hoped would fulfill his dream of conquest. All at whom I point my sword are enemies of Ursus, and every desyatina that Ursine can fire may touch shall belong to Ursus. Vladimir Ivanovich. We also have a curved sword passed down through generations of Ursine rulers is not only a symbol of imperial authority, but also a display of Ursus's enduring power. Tsar Ivanovich built new Orangenium factories at a breakneck pace, and Ursus's economic and military strength grew rapidly. The old guard nobility who dominated the military were unhappy about the rise of industrial nobles with no military background, but the military strength of Ursus nevertheless flourished under Tsar Vladimir's rule. He started the 9th and 10th Ursus-Kazimir Wars, pushing back the Kazimierzian line 100 kilometers, intensified attacks on the Sami, forcing them towards even more frozen soil. He even had designs on Litania in the south and distant Higashi, and there were rumors that he had already drawn up plans for a siege of Londinium. The Ursine war machine operated at full bore for decades under his rule, and the fires of war from the north ravaged Terra. With each victory, the Empire's power grew, as did the Tsar's renown. Ursus did not notice the crisis brewing beneath the triumphant reports, nor did the Tsar imagine that his ambition would be brought to an unceremonious end. The turning point was the Blood Peak campaign in 1072, where the Eastern Army suffered a shocking defeat that forced its retreat from Higashi. Severely shaken by the setback, Tsar Vladimir fell gravely ill and passed away in less than a year. He fell ill from shock. His son, Fyodor, immediately set about weakening the influence of the army upon ascending to the throne, promoting counselors from civilian backgrounds and imposing strict constraints upon the expansion of army territory. He even proposed a reform plan called Territory of Governorate. In the summer of 1074, a group of soldiers beat up a noble in a tavern of Gregorskaya Guvernia near Dietry-Grifferberg, only to subsequently demand that the governor's council punish the injured noble, leading to a series of protests throughout the society. In the winter of that year, the 6th Army invaded the governorate under the pretext of restoring order, executing the entire council for treason. Tsar Fyodor was furious and recalled the marshal of the 6th Army, but the marshal defied his orders. Instead, he mobilized the 3rd, 8th, and part of the 4th armies to occupy 3 governorates around Dietry-Grifferberg, demanding a restoration of the army's authority and Tsar Fyodor's abdication. Negotiations between the state council and the mutinous armies broke down in late 1074, and it was said that the 5th Army launched an attack on the 6th Army at the Tsar's orders. The 6th and 8th armies fought back immediately and started the besiege upon, I should say either the siege or to besiege. Started to besiege upon Dietry-Grifferberg with shells falling upon the imperial palace. Tsar Fyodor then issued a decree to the entire nation denouncing the 4 mutinous armies to be traitors to the empire and ordered harsh punishment for the rebels. So this army thing is very important. Important thing to keep track of for also modern lore. So the Sixth Army called in, joined with the 3rd Army, the 8th Army, and a part of the 4th Army. However that much was. So they were rebels. Then you have the 5th Army was loyal. They attacked the 6th Army. How many armies are there? Not sure we know. At least 8. So they attacked it, and then ordering harsh punishment. The Central Army defended Deity Grifferberg through the winter until the 2nd and 7th Armies returned from the Kazimierzian front in spring, engaging the insurgents in battle. The fires of war spread from Deity Grifferberg to the rest of Ursus, ushering in a bloody civil war that lasted until the winter of 1076, culminating in the defeat of the insurgents when the 6th and 8th armies were annihilated. That's also important. So the 2nd and 7th armies were loyal. And I guess there's a central army. I guess that's also, I don't know if that's like the 1st army or not. The 6th and 8th were destroyed. The impact of the Great Rebellion was far-reaching. Millions died in the Civil War, and countless factories were destroyed. As the primary instigators, the 6th and 8th armies were completely disbanded, while the accomplices, the 3rd and 4th armies, were reassigned to remote regions. So the 4th army, I mean, it said partly joined, but I guess joined enough that they were considered largely to be rebels. The territories controlled by these armies were redistributed to the loyal armies, and the old guard nobles who had remained loyal to the Tsar seized the opportunity to man council seats for the next 20 years. The political divide, oropathy, crises, and social inequality of Ursus were exposed and magnified, forcing difficult decisions upon Tsar Fyodor. Yeah, so it's important to keep track of those because although the Great Rebellion was I mean, it was only like 20-ish years ago, maybe. Well, not even maybe 20-ish, more than 20-ish years ago, but yeah. Those armies are still a thing, right? The two sides of the armies are still a thing. They're still the surviving rebel armies are still pretty rebellious. The loyal armies are still loyal, but are also, you know, using that loyalty to continue to control the government. So, just because the rebellion ended doesn't mean that there was not long-lasting repercussions. Now, we do have this Blood Peak campaign over here. So the Blood Peak campaign. Since the start of the war, the army's negative attitude towards combat had been very small, hard to see, had been readily apparent. My unit had originally been ordered to cover the 9th and 10th Defender Regiments, as well as the 17th Artillery Regiment, my brother's unit, during an assault on an enemy-held town. However, even after being in position for 2 weeks, we never received the attack order from division headquarters. We assumed the operation had been cancelled and awaited for our post for another week, but still no orders came, neither to attack nor to retreat. Soon we started running short on supplies. My direct superior, Captain Andre, was deeply puzzled. He told me that the last time he went back to the Great General Staff, He saw stacks of silk envelopes on their desks. Likely imperial orders sent from deity Grifferberg, yet not a single one had been opened. The officers merely smiled at him and told him, "Hold your position." We lingered in camp for more than a month, waiting for nothing. The warships were practically sinking into the ground. We even heard rumors that the Sixth Army had been given orders to retreat and were withdrawing on a large scale. But that was impossible. Suddenly, fear gripped us, and it wasn't the enemy we feared. It was the unsettling realization that we were witnessing a side of the Empire we were never meant to see. From the memoirs of Lieutenant Yuri Zaitsev, 4th Army, 2nd Special Division, 5th Artillery Regiment. Interesting. So, of course, the 4th Army was technically a rebel army. At least part of it was. Which would probably be the officers in the general staff. And then the 6th Army was retreating. So it seems like it says, now here it says that the Blood Peak campaign ended in a shocking defeat and was forced to retreat from Higashi. But this letter makes me feel like this was planned, right? That they were already planning rebellion at that point in time. The 4th Army left parts of itself that were maybe known to be loyalists as a purge, left them there, while the 6th Army retreated, quote unquote, and marched back towards deity Grifferberg. That's what it feels like to me. Maybe that's a wrong interpretation, but that letter makes me think that it was all a plan from the get-go. And that's why part of the 4th Army is only... That's why that paragraph says part of the 4th Army, because there was a part that would have been loyal. They got rid of it or left it behind. Interesting. Very interesting. And then we have this. Construction of the monument to the 6th Army began in 1072 and was completed in 1073. It was later torn down during the Great Rebellion. After their crushing defeat during the Blood Peak campaign, the 6th Army returned to deity Grifferberg in disgrace. In keeping with tradition, the Tsar commissioned a monument for the returning 6th Army and inscribed with the word Imperial Triumph and Victory Memorial. However, given the painful outcome of the campaign, the monument took on a different meaning. Soldiers of the 6th Army saw it as an insult from the Tsar, despite the fact that by the time the monument was completed, the Tsar himself had already passed away. So Tsar passed away. Was Oh yeah, so Fyodor was not the one. Fyodor's father was been the one who passed away. Okay. Vladimir, I think. Yeah, Vladimir fell ill after the Blood Peak campaign. Yeah. So a lot of it says that they were defeated, but I wonder about that. That letter is very interesting. I mean, maybe that guy just didn't know that they were defeated. But it's something feels suspicious about that whole situation. Something feels off. I'm also curious about the Blood Peak campaign in more detail. They talk about it here and there, but how did Higashi defeat Ursus? I'm curious about that. And now we have geography. The Empire of Ursus's territory in northern Terra is expansive as a result of centuries of conquest and expansion. The Empire's terrain gradually rises in elevation from west to east, from the open plains of the west to the low hills in the central region to the tall mountains in the east. The climate of Ursus is heavily influenced by the polar climate of the northern ice fields. The southern regions are temperate. The winters grow longer and colder as one moves further north, while the mountains region of the east exhibit characteristics of an alpine climate. The Empire of Ursus borders Kazimir, Shlytania, and Yen to the west, south, and east, respectively. To the north of the Sami lands and the Enfi ice fields beyond. 1,000 years of conquest has brought vast expanses under the Empire's control, though much of it is underdeveloped and barely governed. Nevertheless, the Ursus continues to point her sword beyond the borders of the Empire, striving to expand her rule even further. In the vast, harsh tundras of northern Ursus, the climate is so unforgiving that most of Terra's common grain crops cannot survive. The people of the tundra rely on a crop known as masawat to sustain themselves. This hardy lichen emits spores that resemble wheat ears, which can be eaten before they mature. Once fully matured, however, the spores shrivel and become bitter, even slightly toxic. Due to its low yield and strict timing required for harvest, masawat is an unreliable food source, leading to frequent famine in the tundra. Masawat. Is that a real thing? Doesn't look like it. Neat. Either way, though. Neat. Politics and military. The Tsar of Ursus. The Ursine absolute monarchy has its genesis in the martial nature of its founding. The Tsar is to Ursus what a commander is to his soldiers. His every decision the supreme will of the empire. In the military, disobeying the commander's orders is the most severe offense. Likewise, defiance of the Tsar's will be considered high treason and subject to the most severe punishment. The Tsar is also the head of the State Council and supreme commander of the Imperial Army. The entire council, from each councillor to the chairman, answers to the Tsar, and the governors of local administrative divisions answer to the central government. The Tsar is the supreme commander of the Imperial Army, and each army exhibits regular reports or submits regular reports about its movements and planning. Major military actions require the approval of the Tsar. The authority of the Tsar is founded upon war, thus virtually every living person in Ursus is a soldier. The success and failure of its army hinges upon its leader, the Tsar, as does the Tsar's own authority. Soldiers revere a Tsar who leads them to victory, but they are equally quick to doubt a leader who fails to do so, for one who is viewed as indecisive in battles. The failed Ursine invasion of Agashi and subsequent loss of territory in 1072 deeply shook the social order of the empire and the authority of Tsar Vladimir Ivanovich, and set into motion the events of the Great Rebellion. The Imperial Army. The Imperial Army. The official name of the Ursine Imperial Army is Imperialska Army, aka Imperial Army. It seldom acts as a single coordinated entity, a fact that should bring comfort to the rest of Terra. While the Tsar sets a general direction for each army, the specific strategy is determined by its marshal in conjunction with his staff, referencing the Tsar's instructions and operating with a large degree of autonomy. There are 9 armies prior to the Great Rebellion, but the 6th and 8th were disbanded for their role in the insurgency, leaving only 7 remaining. Okay, so there were 9, actually. Okay. So there's a 9th army somewhere. What are they doing? Assuming the first is the central one, what's the 9th one doing? Official sources claim that during wartime mobilization, each army can be bolstered to more than 1 million men on short notice. Ursus has always had a strong military tradition. For military nobles, the strength of their unit represents their authority and influence. There is a comprehensive system of recruitment and training in place of both soldiers and officers, in order to put every sword and cannon into action as quickly as possible in support of Ursus's endless wars. Through Litania influence, Ursus has also integrated Orangenium arts into their conquests. Warcasters are an important part of the army, with academies and instructors dedicated to the study and instruction of military arts. On the front lines of the Ursus army are the heavily armored Shield Guard regiments and the veteran vanguards, followed by heavy drones that roar in the sky, marking targets for the Empire's battleships to pound with saturated bombardment. The Imperial Army has an almost fanatical belief in heavy armor and artillery. Ursine soldiers believe that cold armor and shield can cut one's human self off from the inhumanity of the battlefield, while scorching muzzles and flames can burn away the last vestiges of weakness and cowardice. We love the Shield Guard, or at least the cool guys. There are uncool Shield Guard, but overall, they're pretty cool. As depicted here. Perhaps someone can describe to you what Ursus used to crush civilization itself. The State Council. The councillors of the Ursan State Council may be noble representatives nominated by the Tsar, or imperial representatives nominated by the governorates, councils, and appointed by the Tsar. The State Council, with the Tsar as its leader, is the highest legislative organ of Ursus. It was established in the reforms that followed the First Ursine-Kazimierz War, along with the governance and local councils. The first councillors and officials of the government consisted partly of retired officers and partly of active military nobles. For a long time, Ursine Council primarily served the military, which gave the military significant influence within the council. The council's functions and actual power were vastly different from what they are today. It was the rise of the industrial nobles and their appointment to the council that gave it actual authority. Islam White, the present chairman, is one of these new nobles. Very interesting character, that Islam, right? Here's a portrait of him. Current chairman of the State Council, Islam White. Among the many chairmen who served in the State Council, White also stands out as someone of an anomaly. His facial expressions often make people think he's indecisive. When the artist painting his portraits suggested him to give more commanding features, Chairman White politely declined. He's probably a good guy. Time will tell, though. Time will tell. He's definitely more moderate compared to most of Ursus politicians. So, time will tell. Administrative divisions. The primary Administrative divisions of Ursus is the Governorate, each of which boasts a number of sedentary settlements and nomadic cities. Governors are appointed by the Tsar. The Tsar organizes councils of noble representatives from nomadic cities and leads the governance administrative departments. The Governance Council is responsible for nominating representatives to the State Council, whose appointments are then confirmed by the Tsar. There are also army territories that exist independently of governorates and their governors and councils. Army territories constitute both the army's irregular encampments and the fiefdoms of the old nobles or nobles of military service. These territories have their own distinct administrative and legal systems, largely determined by the constituent marshal and his staff. During the reign of Tsar Vladimir, land was often granted as a reward for military merit, and army territories grew rapidly with Ursus's expansion. Yeah. And there's a demilitarized zone around deity Grifferberg. The army's not supposed to cross into deity Grifferberg territory. So there is no army territory there. The aristocracy. The origins of the Ursine system of nobility are closely linked to the empire's military awards. In ancient times, Tsar and Grand Dukes would give noble titles to loyal soldiers and staff based on military merit. Even within the imperial family, it was often military service rather than blood that determined one's status. Commoners who earned the favor of the Grand Dukes through extraordinary valor in battle would also be promoted into the nobility. Over 1,000 years, this system of noble meritocracy inspired the soldiers of Ursus to great deeds and expanded the ranks of the nobility through the centuries, forming what would become known as the Old Nobility. During Tsar Vladimir's reign, the rise of Oranginium industry and nomadic cities brought new blood to the nobility. The Tsar included industry in his war plan, calling factory workers his industrial soldiers and measuring their merit in terms of production. Wealthy civilians would become industrial nobles or new nobles by making huge payments to the government. While appearing to be in constant conflict, a separation between nobles of military service and industrial nobles, the old and the new, is not always clear and distinct. In the aftermath of the Great Rebellion, many old nobles began investing in mines and refineries through their armies, while new nobles often enlisted young and fit relatives into the military, hoping to increase their status within the nobility. Then we have law. The draconian military law of Ursus is perhaps the only law in the Empire that is consistently enforced. While outstanding martial merit is richly rewarded, those who violate military law are subject to equally harsh justice. Military justice is feared not only by the officers in the army, but within the nobility as well. The threat of military justice alone is sometimes sufficient punishment. On more than one occasion, an offender has committed suicide before a military tribunal could formally pronounce judgment, fearing the punishment to come. The deterrent power of Ursine military officers and powerful nobles. Nope. Where am I? I lost my place. Oh, no, yeah. The deterrent power of Ursine military laws depends on its enforcement, and military tribunals are controlled by military officers and powerful nobles. In many cases, so-called military law is simply summary judgment by a high-ranking officer. To many people's surprises, Ursus also has a relatively comprehensive civil judiciary, complete with legislative, judicial, and enforcement organs. Each government and nomadic city also has its own council, courts, and police. However, the judiciary does not enjoy true autonomy and freedom from interference and has close ties to the administrative branch. Aside from the noble officials involved in the legal system's everyday operation, the Tsar also has the authority to intervene at any level, at any point in the process, even passing judgment directly in the form of an edict. In practice, however, direct intervention by the Tsar in judicial affairs is a rare event, mostly occurring during mediation of noble factional disputes or when the Tsar grants pardons to convicted criminals. And here we have rates at which civil courts settled cases in Gregorskaya gubernia Ursus in 1092. We have general cases in green, military-involved cases in orange. So, it seems like, the courts mostly settled civilian cases. 60% of civilian murders were settled in court. Only 20% of military-involved murders were settled in court. And that number goes down and for the other things. Assault is lower for both robbery, theft. The soldiers of Ursus are subject to strict military law, but they face little restrictions outside of the army. There are few civilian courts capable of effectively ruling on cases involving military personnel. Actually, it looks like we're going to get through this subsection, so actually, that will work out pretty well. Economy. The foundation of the Ursian economy is, without a doubt, the military-industrial complex, one of the biggest and most advanced on Terra. The previous Tsar saw industry as inseparable from war and devoted in considerable effort to its development, building the Ursian war machine with fervor. Major cities were transformed into industrial centers packed with factories. Some of these were funded by old noble investment, while others saw their owners elevated to nobility. One way or the other, the profits ended up in the hands of the rich and the powerful. The pace of industrialization varies from area to area. The capital, deity Grifferberg, is the empire's most important industrial center, followed by other eastern cities, with the west lagging behind. In addition to military industry, Ursus also has a robust oranginium mining and metal processing industry, both closely related to military itself. The vast expanses of Ursus contains rich deposits of mineral resources. Most of these are located in the harsh western regions bordering Kazimierz and Sami. The armies have an iron grip on these territories and the mining rights that come with them. Forced laborers sent to the northwest mines work day and night in ice and snow, black ore in front of them and dark clouds behind them. The fruits of their blood and sweat transported to factories in the central and eastern parts of the empire. Thousand-year history of deity Grifferberg. In the year 31, Igor led the Ursus rebel army to capture deity Grifferberg. He walked through the gates of the city alongside his most trusted allied hippogriff generals, whether to thank them for their assistance or to demonstrate his ability to balance benevolence and authority. Igor retained the name deity Grifferberg and made the city the capital of the Empire of Ursus. In 1033, to demonstrate his commitment to industrialization, Tsar Vladimir decreed that deity Grifferberg, along with his magnificent palace, be relocated onto a massive mobile platform. Deity Grifferberg has since become the Empire's industrial hub. Culture and society. The Empire of Ursus has a population of roughly 80 million. So practically twice as much as Victoria. Mostly living in the central regions, where the terrain is relatively flat, the climate is relatively warm, and the core is relatively near. The difference in environment and development across regions is particularly apparent in terms of population distribution. Nearly 10 million people live in Deity Grifferberg. Awesome, okay, so 10 million in the capital alone. And its surrounding nomadic cities. But the northwest tundra is almost solely inhabited by mine laborers and the local army. Other than the Ursus majority, there is also a considerable population of minority races in the empire. When Tsar Vladimir resigned, he promoted many outsiders to prominent positions, even elevating them to the nobility over numerous objections. The countless running of the war machine placed heavy pressure on manpower and resources, and the rulers of the empire must utilize the advantage of every race that inhabits this land. Vladimir's tolerance sparked a surge of enthusiasm across the nation, with citizens of various races proudly calling Ursus their home. Kautze has something to say about this. Race-based discrimination still exists in Ursus, though it is far less severe from the discrimination directed at the infected. Take Buldrakus T, for example. I have to look closer at this for a second. He accomplished enough to obtain the rank of general, but his Sarkaz race prevented him from using... Wait, what? Oh, his Sarkaz race prevented him from rising above captain. So he could have been a general, but because he was a Sarkaz, he could only stay a captain. The rank he attained after leaving the military and carried with him to his grave. So he attained captain. Yeah, but he could have been a general. Thanks for the effort. Happy to help. While the image of Ursus as a militaristic, hard-drinking people is deeply ingrained, it fails to represent the full spectrum of Ursine culture. The country boasts a rich tradition of literature, music, dance, and theater, with all social classes feeling a strong sense of pride in the national arts. During the late Tsar Vladimir's reign, in line with the empire's military expansion policies, a wave of dances, plays, and literary works depicting Tsar Igor's rebellion were produced, pushing realist art off the stage for a time in favor of war mythology. In recent years, Ursus has improved relations with neighboring countries, and foreign culture from nations alike Colombia and Kazimierz have deeply influenced younger generations of Ursines. Rock music records and night competition tapes flood the underground markets of Ursus nomadic cities. The plight of the infected in Ursus is among the worst in all of Terra. They have been long excluded from society. Many infected are sent to work in the tundra, while those in nomadic cities must hide their identities just to survive. Many nobles openly support and encourage the persecution of the infected, even forming infected patrol units to root out and dispose of them. Although Deity Grifferberg has issued a series of decrees in an attempt to ease the escalating tensions, the results were minimal. It wasn't until the outbreak of the Chernobog Lungman incident, which drew tremendous international attention, that the infected issue expanded beyond the empire of Ursus. Conclusion: Ursine Crossroads. The Ursine Tsar Vladimir Ivanovich once said, "Wheresoever my hands point, there stands Ursus." Beneath the heavy-laden clouds and amidst the biting cold snow, the Erikson war machine exists, or casts its dark shadow, standing silently in the northern lands. 1,000 years of bitter warfare has stained an impenetrable armor with thick, scalding blood. Now at a crossroads in history, this colossal war machine has finally halted its relentless advance to lick its own bleeding wounds. The will of Terra may have forced Ursus into a temporary retreat, but who will wield this sharp, gleaming blade of an empire, and where will it strike next? Whose hand now steers the fate of Ursus? Indeed. We have up here, we have a poster from the commemorative performance of Sergei Katayev's classical work, Igor Veliki, 3rd edition, at the Erikson Imperial Theater. Playwrights are eager to retell Igor's story over and over again. Dozens of operas and ballet are entitled Igor Veliki, and people distinguish them by the names of their playwrights, unless, of course, a playwright has rewritten Igor Veliki 3 times. So Igor Veliki is also the other Igors as well. That's just another name. The guy has too many names, it's got to be said. Then we have, what is this? Statistics compiled from Ursus Vanguard News ranking the careers that young people most want to pursue. General is number 1. Duelist, number 2. Factory manager, number 3. Naval captain, number 4. Rock musician, number 5. Playwright, number 6. Personal bodyguard, number 7. Oh, we have a tiny little thing about the Yorotzvo. In Erikson culture, there is a tradition of revering Yorotzvo, holy fools. Yorotzvo are those who, though they may look like raving lunatics on the street, often express profound insights into the nature of the world. Erikson tradition holds that with the greatest aspect of human nature is the ability to maintain deep love for humanity, even in the face of suffering. The erratic behavior of the Yorotzvo is seen as a way of challenging others' love for humanity through disturbing means, their wisdom and perfection transcending worldly limitations. So that's how they perceive it, I see. Okay, well, Council has something to say about this. Final thing here. The Yorotzvo is often seen by the Erikson as proof of some blessing or enlightenment, but in truth, it is closer to a curse. One becomes a cursed Yorotzvo not through some so-called revelation or deep love, but through a ritual we have yet to understand. The ritual may have originated in the frozen lands of Sami, but now it's only practiced in Erikson soil. Only one person can pass the ritual at a time, and that individual becomes the Yorotzvo. This ritual grants the participant the ability to see and do things ordinary people cannot. However, the powers it bestows far exceeds what a human can endure. It shatters the Yorotzvo's mind, severing their ties with the world and condemning them to madness. The madness imposed upon the Yorotzvo allows them to perceive the veil of reality and communicate with that which lies beyond it. It even imbues them with the ability to bind demon fragments to their own mortal flesh. Yorotzvo is bad news, that's for sure. So it's a ritual. Who conducts the ritual, actually? So it's a ritual in which the person becomes pretty much possessed by like collapsal energy. But who conducts the ritual? And why do they keep doing it? Probably, well, why do they keep doing it? It is a weird cultural thing. Like they said, it is a cultural thing. But it seems to be sort of like this way to maintain Erikson society through this weird mix of giving them kind of like a folk hero, right? This person whom, as it says here, can express profound insights into the nature of the world. Holds that the greatest aspect of human nature is the ability to maintain deep love for humanity, even in the face of suffering, right? So it's like, yeah, Ursus sucks. Life here sucks. We know it sucks. The Yodvotso is showing you that it sucks, but use the Yodvotso to, like, all that's okay. Don't worry, right? Don't worry about it. It sucks. Nothing you can do, but like, trust in the Yorotsuvo to give you, like, not necessarily hope, but hope for lack of a better word, perhaps. Like, you can find enlightenment in the fact that your life sucks. Don't try to make it better, right? Don't try to make it better. Just accept that it sucks. That, to me, seemed to be what kind of the Yorotsuvo is about. Culturally. Oh, there's more. What is this? What is this picture, Kautsit? Ah, it's continuation. I'm not sure why it's on this page. Continuing, this might explain more. The Tsar of Ursus, of course, would not allow such a powerful individual to roam free. For centuries, the Yorotsuvo has been a great honor and deity, Grifferberg. The Tsar, employing the Yorotsuvo's power and demonic fragments from the north, created a military unit far beyond the control of mortal men. The creation of this unit was even more brutal than that of the Yorotsuvo. Their bodies were utterly destroyed during the fusion with the demonic fragments, and they now rely on special life support apparatus to survive. Their minds were cruelly enlightened by the self-proclaimed Holy Yorotsuvo, severing their thoughts and desires from all connection to the mortal world. The Yorotsuvo turned them into beings of their same ilk, inhuman. They no longer belong to this mortal realm. Confronting them often feels like facing the nation of Ursus itself. It would be foolhardy to expect them to heed anyone's commands, not the Yorotsuvos who created them, nor even the Tsar himself. But the mortal Tsar coveted power and strength. He arrogantly claimed as his own the Empire's blades, or the Emperor's blades. Ultimately, he paid the price for his hubristic greed. So the Yorotsuvo, okay, so the Yorotsuvo is directly the source of the Emperor's blades. Okay. And yeah, it's the Emperor's blades is the spirit of Ursus. The Yorotsuvo is like the embodiment of just the absolute dread of Ursus society. Don't know what happened here. But then we have a whole section again on the founding of the Ursus Empire. That's interesting. Five, 3, 1, but we'll have to finish that. Continue that another time. That will be all for now. Not sure how long chapter 5 is. I hope we get every country. If we don't, I'm gonna be disappointed in that. Hopefully we get a section for every country, but we'll see. We'll be back with this at some point. It's, you know, I can never actually schedule exactly when this is going to come back. We'll be back with this at some point. So until then, thank you all for watching. And may the sands of time treat you well.